Hello and welcome back to another video of the Brainy Heart. This video is the second part of a two-part video series about the spinal cord. So if you haven't checked out part 1 of this video, be sure to check it out here. The last video was mainly about the structure, but this video I'll be talking about the gray and white matter present in the spinal cord. In the previous video, I gave a quick run-through of gray matter and white matter in the spinal cord, but I did not go deep enough. But just to review, as you progress down the spinal cord, there is more gray matter and less white matter. And you can think of this as a train that starts in your brain, and as it comes down the spinal cord, more passengers leave. So at the end, you're left with very few passengers. And the passengers basically symbolize the neurons in the white matter. That was just a quick review of what I talked about in the previous video. But now, I'd like to dive deeper into the gray matter and white matter found in the spinal cord. So let's get right into it. So if I draw a line going through the middle of the spinal cord, then this side would be the dorsal side, and this side would be the ventral side. And this is a animated picture, and this is a actual picture of how a spinal cord might look. So if I draw a imaginary line, this side would be dorsal and this side would be ventral. So the dorsal side is the back, and the ventral side is the front. And the ventral side has two ventral horns, and the dorsal side has two dorsal horns. The ventral horns control somatic motor activity. So somatic motor activity is basically motor information that's being sent to somatic organs, and somatic organs, or
Organs like the bone, muscles, skin, and other soft tissues.
And remember, motor information is efferent, meaning it's going from the brain to the organs, so it's exiting information. The dorsal horn controls somatic sensory activity. So it sends the sensory information from the organs to the brain. So sensory information is afferent. And this area over here, which is a small bump, can be found in some regions of the spinal cord. And this bump is called the intermediate zone. It controls visceral, motor, and sensory activity. Visceral organs are your internal organs, like your heart, liver, stomach, kidneys, etc. So basically, the ventral horns control somatic motor information, the dorsal horns control somatic sensory information, and the intermediate zone controls the visceral, motor, and sensory information. Remember this, as we will come back to this topic later in this video. Now I'd like to label a few things that I think will be helpful. These yellow colored things are spinal nerves, and they relay the neurons that contain the sensory and motor information. And this part is the dorsal part of the spinal nerves, and this is the ventral part. Both the sensory neurons and the motor neurons combine at one point. So the motor information is going this way, while the sensory information is coming in this way. So at one point, they're all in the same spinal nerve, and they're just traveling in different directions. But let's get to labeling, shall we? This is the dorsal root ganglion, and it's where all your primary sensory neurons are located. And this area is the dorsal root. And the dorsal root separates into dorsal rootlets, which lead into the dorsal horns. Same thing on this side. This would be your dorsal root ganglion. This would be your dorsal root, and these would be your dorsal rootlets. And on the ventral side, you only have a ventral root, which is this area right here. And then the ventral root branches off into ventral rootlets. And that ends up going to the ventral horn. And on the other side, it's going to be the same thing. You'll have your rootlets over here, and then you have your ventral root here. So those were the spinal nerves that relay from the sensory or motor information, and I thought that would be helpful, so I just added that part. But back to gray matter and white matter in the spinal cord. So like I said before, your intermediate zone has motor neurons that innervate your visceral organs, and your ventral horn contains somatic motor neurons, which innervate your somatic organs like your skin, bone, muscles, and other soft tissues. So these somatic motor neurons are called alpha motor neurons. So this is how we abbreviate them. And the alpha motor neuron kind of looks like a ninja star with a tail. So that's how a alpha motor neuron looks like. If I tell you to put your hands up in the air and you do it, those muscles in the hand are innervated by your ventral horns and the alpha motor neurons. And in regards to the intermediate zone, which is found only in some regions, and specifically T1 to L2 and S2 to S4. So the intermediate zone is found only in vertebrae T1 to L2, which is the starting of the thoracic region till about the middle of the lumbar region, and then S2 to S4, which is the three middle vertebrae of the sacral region. And like I said before, the intermedial zone innervates. The intermedial zone controls motor and sensory information to the visceral organs. There are two different types of visceral motor neurons. The IML, or the intermedial zone, and the regions from T1 to L2 have sympathetic preganglionic cells. And the IML in your S2 to S4 region have parasympathetic preganglionic cells. So it's said that the sympathetic cells control your fight or flight response, while your parasympathetic neurons control your rest and digest systems. So, just as a review, your sympathetic neurons, which are found in the IML, which is found in T1 to L2, are responsible for your fight or flight responses, while your parasympathetic neurons, which are found in the IML in the regions S2 to S4, are responsible for your rest and digest systems. But overall, both the neurons innervate your internal organs, so just keep that in mind. And the sensory information comes in through visceral sensory neurons. That's about it for the IML. The final thing that I want to talk about is white matter. So the white matter can be separated into some regions. So you have one region over here, and that region is the dorsal funiculus, and it's divided into two regions. One side is the right dorsal funiculus, and the other side is the left dorsal funiculus. This side would be the right, and this side would be the left. And you also have a lateral funiculus, which is over here. This is the right lateral funiculus. This would be the left lateral funiculus. And finally, we have the ventral funiculus, which is over here, just like the dorsal, and it's split into half, which is the right and left ventral funiculus. Your white matter also has two different tracts, ascending and descending. So ascending normally means going up, and that's exactly what's happening here. The information in these tracts are coming from the periphery or from the bottom and go up the spinal cord to the brain. So that's the sensory information, because that's the afferent information. It's arriving and going into the brain. And sensory information comes from all over your body, like your skin, nose, eyes, etc., etc. And you also have descending tracts, and normally descending means coming down. And that is motor information because it is efferent, which means that it's exiting information. So it's coming from your brain into the spinal cord and out to the organs. But that's the overall picture of the white matter in your spinal cord. So that was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned from it. I'm always open to comments, questions, and or suggestions. Also, check out my blog at brainyhearts.wordpress.com. This is the Brainy Heart signing off. I'll catch you later in the next video.